All of us have two tongues. The first is for them, a broken joke of language. It is a lament cloaked in deception, a bloody strangeness in our throats. It tastes of copper, salt, and dust. The second is for us. It is a song of dreams and drums, whispered promises and incantations. We spoke it in the quarters during the rare late nights and early mornings when they were not looking into our mouths for signs of betrayal. This tongue is rich, savory, and if we're not mindful, can bring us to ruin. This tongue reminds us that despite everything, we love. The characters are using what I call coded language, because whenever you have an oppressed minority in the company or under the supervision of a larger majority, you want to be able to communicate in a way that excludes them, so they don't know what you're thinking or what you're feeling. So I have the characters speak a certain way when they're in the presence of their captors, and speak differently when they're alone. I've read deeply in African American history, and I teach African American literature and African American studies, so this is sort of an area that I'm pretty familiar with, right? And I've written other things that take place in similar settings. So it was just a matter of, first of all, you want to tell a good story. You want to, if not be entertaining, be riveting. You want the reader to keep turning the page. So you can't just give them a history lesson. You can't just say, in 1852, conditions were like this. You have to create characters that live out those experiences, right? So that was a priority for me, creating believable characters that you would care about and whose adventures or misadventures you'd want to follow as the book progresses. That's one of the things you really want to work hard when you're establishing characters in a novel. They have to be different from each other. So one thing I tried to do is give each character certain aspects of language that only they would use. Different backgrounds, because each character was born in different circumstances, right, and lived in different places. So all of that shapes their language, how they see the world, what they think about. And there's this larger question of, is there such a thing as freedom? How can we be free? So some of the characters spend a lot of time thinking about that. Other characters like William, it's day to day. I just want to get through this day. I don't want to torture myself with this idea that I could be free somewhere. So the English version of that idea is yonder, right? So the characters are often, some of them haven't been outside the space where they've been confined. So they have all kind of ideas about what's yonder, and others don't, right? So they speculate a lot about, if we were to get away from this place, where would we end up? Where would we be, right? So that's how yonder comes into it. Also, yonder features in the music of the enslaved black people during that period, right? They had songs about going up yonder, and it was coded language. So going up yonder could mean going to heaven, right? But could also mean going north to freedom. One of the things that I hope people will get, and especially black people, is the importance of telling their own stories. Because if you look at American stories about that period, they're very distorted, they're not very accurate, and people like me seldom have a voice in them. Certainly not an authentic voice, where we talk and think like human beings. It's a fascinating concept, right? So that's one of the things that I'm pushing back against. I call it writing a counter-narrative, right? I'm trying to correct the story of America's development. And of course, you know, just in my tour of spots, culturally relevant spots to black people here, I know the same erasure has taken place, right, systematically. And so what we have to do as writers and artists and thinkers is push back against that and say, let's consider this. What must this have been like, right? So for example, in the United States, Thomas Jefferson, who was the leading authority on black behavior, supposedly, said black people were incapable of romantic love. They only had animal desires. They don't know anything about longing and affection, right? And that's insane, right? And that was widely believed in the United States. So part of what I wanted to do in this book is show black people in love and how powerful that was for them and how liberating that was for them. And it was in part inspired by a real couple, William and Margaret. William was enslaved by George Washington. He assisted him throughout the Revolutionary War. His wife, Margaret, was free. She was not enslaved, right? So George Washington said to William, when this war is over, because of your service to me, I'm going to let you bring Margaret to the plantation and live with you, right? But then when the war was over, Mrs. Washington didn't like Margaret, said, no, can't happen. So he never got to live with the woman he loved and the woman who loved him his whole life. So that was part of the question. What would you do if you found your special person and it was against the law for you to be with that person, right? What would you do? Would you be willing to die? Would you be willing to risk death? What challenges would you undertake? So that's kind of the situation I wanted to put the characters in. I wanted them to be in love, and then have someone else say, well, you know, it's not really up to you whether you can be in love, right? And so I put them in those circumstances, and then I kind of watched them respond to that. So one of the things that I was thinking about in my own family, well, I should back up and say that African Americans can't trace their families back very far because until 1870, we weren't listed on census because we were property. And then when they started listing us, we had no names. So it would just say one Negro man, one Negro woman, right? So quite a bit is lost because we weren't considered important enough or human enough to have full identities, right? So in my own family, I can go back a little beyond 1870 to one couple, and I have a photograph of this couple, and I had it on my desk as I wrote. And their names were Sam and Iris Harris, and they were in love and they were enslaved, and they were still children when emancipation happened, and they eventually got married, and I'm their descendant, right? So, but the question that I had was, what about before Sam and Iris? Who made Sam? Who made Iris? What were the circumstances? Right? And so because I don't have access to that actual information, I just put their photo on my table, on my desk, and I imagined it.